Uh, let's see. So today maybe chapter 29.
I think we might have finished 28.
Sorry?
Yes, I think we finished 28 last time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so 29 and 30 is still around basically Milarepa and his non-human disciples. Yeah. Seringma, the five spirit sisters. And in a way, it's kind of interesting because now for contemporary practitioners who identify as of the Kagyu lineage, after Milarepa, of course, the figure of Gampopa is considered a key instrumental figure, said to be the chief successor of Milarepa, at least the way we now tell that succession. But in this collection, Gampopa turns up in one chapter, chapter 41. Seringma, these five spirit sisters got like 4 or 5 chapters. Gampopa only turns up, in chapter 41. And then, of course, from 41 on, maybe here and there, he will appear again. But only one chapter. It's specifically, in fact, it's called the Noble Gampopa. And then, among the human disciples of Milarepa, those that other human beings could easily see and verify and say, "Oh yeah, you're here," is this other figure called Rei Chongpa. And Rei Chongpa is throughout all these stories. Yeah? Not at the beginning, but once Milarepa has become a teacher in his own right, rather than still just on in that point where he is mainly a disciple of Marpa. But once Milarepa matures into being a teacher, then Rei Chongpa is clearly a constant presence. So Rei Chongpa was the one who spent kind of the most time with Milarepa. And Milarepa and Rei Chongpa's relationship is not as tumultuous as Milarepa and Marpa, but nonetheless, there were disagreements, there were misunderstandings. I think sometimes we over whitewash what was going on between these teachers and students in the past. And in a way, then, I think it robs us of the ability to see that in any relationship, much less a relationship where the teacher's primary reason for being a teacher, to state it in kind of bombastic, extreme terms, although that's not the only way to look at it, but to state it in bombastic, extreme terms, as Zhongsai Khyentse Rinpoche says it, he says, a teacher is an assassin that you hire to take yourself out. Very extreme terms, along the lines of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's way of expressing things. But it gives you an idea, like they're not quite the way we think of a therapist. They could, they could function like that. But the teacher is the one that you hire. You hire, okay, so that's important. You hire, right? It's not the teacher come looking for you, but you hire this person to be your assassin. Don't hire this person to be someone else's assassin. That's not allowed. You hire this person to be your own assassin. So, of course, there's going to be difficulties in negotiating that relationship. And so we see this, if you know how to read and pay attention, you'll see that Milarepa and Rechungpa, there were times where Rechungpa in a huff, would walk off, in ways that Milarepa did not do with his own teacher Marpa. It seems that Milarepa was always just very patient. If anything, he blamed himself, he got disappointed, he walked away, right? So that's Milarepa and Marpa's relationship. Marpa was the dominant figure that Milarepa understood, right? The kind of Milarepa's existential dread was so great that Milarepa was willing to put up with whatever difficulty that came from Marpa. But he struggled. Yeah? So don't think that he did not struggle. I'm sure he struggled with doubts even, right? Is this Marpa for real or what? Like, is he toying with me? Is he really, doing what he knows is best for me? So I'm sure that those kinds of doubts are there. With Rechungpa, you can see more actually. And so if you do another read of this volume and just track, Rechungpa's story, I think you'll see some of the more subtle things that were going on between him and Milarepa. So in one scenario, or one theme there is Rechungpa had pride. In ways that Milarepa did not have pride in relation to Marpa. But Rechungpa was such that he had pride. Then he went to India as well, right? So it's sort of like saying, what do you know in Arkansas, right? So imagine, someone from Arkansas now has gone to Nepal and studied for years, right? Then he comes back, right? And he thinks, I know more than my guru. He's never even been to the Holy Land. What does he know? And so Milarepa understood that. And so, they had this back and forth. Milarepa is like, you might have gotten more fancy things, right? But I have realization. You have information. Now, of course, at first, Rechungpa wasn't convinced, So there's this theme of like Rechungpa. And because in some instances, Milarepa said, okay, you received that particular special practice technique. Okay, now give it to me, as an offering. Like, I have been your teacher, so I would like to know that topic. So Rechungpa got a little bit proud, It's like, yeah, now I have, goods that my teacher don't have. It used to be my teacher had goods that I didn't have. So anyway, just to point out some of these figures in here. So Rechungpa was the one that spent the most time with Milarepa. But Rechungpa's lineage, so to say, right, a succession that continued, never had a very strong independent existence. It was much more itinerant. The nature of Milarepa's lifestyle, Rechungpa's lifestyle, it was a much more itinerant and therefore lacking in any institutional support. Yeah, many of us are quite adverse to institutional support because, our maybe personal experience or just generally watching, how organized religion and hierarchy and institution, we've become so tired of it, But one of my teachers like to tease, he says, if you dread, organized religion, wait till you end up with disorganized religion. So anyway, it's understandable, like we are suspicious, we are like, I don't want all of that. But we should not fail to recognize that in part is because Gampopa, right, who gets only one chapter in this, Gampopa recognized the importance of a container. to keep the lineage going. And that container for him, because of his own background, which is a monastic container, so he used that container and the Kagyu continued strong. Because Gampopa used that container, that monastic container. Rechongpa, Milarepa, they did not adopt that container. They were itinerant, wandering ascetics. They were so adverse to organized religion, so to say. But then, if Gampopa did not come along to provide a more stable container, then today we might not even hear anything about Rechongpa, much less Milarepa or Marpa. Because those traditions, those lineages that came down from Marpa, Milarepa, Rechongpa, in fact, mostly came down to us because of Gampopa's disciples. And Gampopa's disciples went on to build communities. So maybe it's not even so much about per se institution, but stable communities. And in the context of 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century Tibet, stable communities were largely monastic communities. Like Marpa himself, again, if we go one generation back, right? So Milarepa's teacher was Marpa. If you go back to Marpa's generation, Marpa's key disciple, again, wasn't exactly Milarepa. Marpa's key disciple, in the way that Rechongpa was Milarepa's key disciple, right? Marpa's equivalent was someone called Ngo. Ngo was the family name, Ngok. Ngo Chukudorje. Ngo Chukudorje, in temperament, in style, resemble Marpa. Just as Rechongpa, in temperament, in style, resembled Milarepa. Sorry, my stove is yelling at me. Let me go turn the timer off. So Rechongpa was similar in style and temperament to Milarepa, as in, don't care for being in one place, always on the move, right? No partners, just wander in the mountains. Marpa's main disciple was like Marpa. What was Marpa? Marpa was a landowner, a householder. In some accounts, it says that he has 9 wives, although I think that's symbolic. Probably not 9, maybe more than 1. But it's a sign of, like, right, a wealthy landowner. And Marpa himself did not come from aristocratic family. Apparently, he was the equivalent of Tibet's nouveau riche. He kind of gained his own wealth, bought a lot of land, even then, in the 12th century. Oh, no, Marpa was 10th century. He understood, they don't make more land anymore. So he invested in land, so to say, right? And then he rented out his land for others to farm on and all of that. So his chief disciple, Ngo Chokudorje, was someone like that, except that Ngo came from an aristocratic family, the Ngo family. So for many Tibetans, if you didn't come from a prestigious family, nobody bothered to know their family name. In fact, there were no family names. In ways that in the West, everybody has a family name. That's not Tibet. only certain people had family names, and these were the prominent families. So Ngo came from the Ngo aristocratic family. So Ngo was similarly wealthy, had land, married, kids, all of that. He was the main successor of Marpa. His lineage continued, they say, for 9 or 12 generations. I don't remember. So from father to son for nine or 12 generations. And after that, it ended. There were no more successors in that family. But at least the spiritual lineage again entered Gampopa's descendants. So Gampopa's descendants kept things, received things that went all the way back to Marpa, to Ngo. Of course, Marpa to Milarepa, Mila to Gampopa, of course, that line too. But then these now we consider to be side lines, which in their original context were the main line. So I think this is another lesson in impermanence, Seemingly successful now might not be so. Seemingly insignificant now might not be so. Yeah. So at the time of the composition of this text, of the putting together of this text, which is Changnyeong Heruka was more like Rechongpa. And Changnyeong Heruka's time is not yet decided that Gampopa's side of the Kagyu is going to be the main side. And so he only gets one chapter in here. So this is a little bit about the history of these lineages. So anyway, the Seringma sisters here. So it's much more kind of magical, shamanic, these few chapters, because you're dealing with like spirit beings, right? Are they real? Are they not real? So as we discussed last time, for all the people involved, right, in the stories here, they are real enough. They're not symbolic the way we think of symbolic. They are real enough. They are real enough that they can cause hailstorm to take place. They are real enough that they can, threaten, and their threats can be felt by the human beings. They are real enough. But the way Milarepa was able to overcome them, the gist of it is Milarepa attended to his own mind, his own perception. Primarily. Yes, of course, he talks to them, but even in talking to them, he says to them, the reason why you cannot harm me, the reason why your tricks are not going to work on me is due to my superior understanding of what you are and who you are. And so you cannot harm me. Which again, doesn't mean that Milarepa, even if the language says, these are all figments of my imagination, right? It's not literally that they are figments of imagination like you and I having a nightmare and figments of imagination. What Milarepa is saying is, if in my encounter with you now, harm arises, I experience harm, that experience is my doing. You are just like a catalyst. As in, the Seringma sisters are just the condition. The causes of suffering still comes from my own stuff, so to say, my own complex karmic history. Yeah, so it doesn't render the Serengma sisters out of existence. It just places the understanding in a more helpful way, which is to say, external conditions are at the end only external conditions. Whether suffering or happiness is going to arise due to the stimulation or the catalyst of external conditions, it's still up to us. Up to us on two levels. One, there is a particular karmic pattern at play that predisposes us to experiencing suffering or happiness given certain situations. Predisposes us. So that's one level of how we are responsible. The other level is, as much as there is predisposition, that predisposition is not predestination. And that is also part of understanding karma. Because karma is not predestination. Karma is predisposition. So even if my karmic baggage has predisposed me to experience suffering when something arises, there is still the possibility of my changing that situation. And that is the superior mind training. That comes from superior mind training that can be done now. But it requires training. And so that training is a different kind of predisposition. Yeah, so karma, our past actions, predisposes us to certain ways of experiencing and relating to what arises. Might even summon the arisings. Sometimes we say, our negative karma is summoning all these problems. I'm like, wait, I didn't ask for this. No, you did. Now, we got to be careful here, right, at this point. I always say, emphasize this. Got to be careful now, Don't blame the victim. So this is not to kind of look at other people's situation and say, well, karmically, you deserve it. As well, don't blame the victim yourself. Like, oh, poor me, like bad me. No, it's nothing to. If anything, it's to depersonalize and say, not me, not mine. However, this is what has arisen now. So choices have to be made. What has arisen now, choices still have to be made. So we choose, we choose. We have to choose carefully. Sometimes we are better at it, and other times we are not so good at it. So karma is about making choices. It's not about fate or predestination, which is one of the topics that Milarepas is going to address here. So the five Serengma sisters finally in this chapter, right, all the testing and the pushing and the back and forth has completed. Now they are willing, now they're ready to say, okay, he's the real thing. Yeah, he's the real thing. So now we are going to become his disciples. We want to seek instructions from him. We're going to do this now. So then they formally say, they formally said to him, Like, can you instruct us? Can you give us this teaching and that teaching? Later in the next chapter, which is still regarding them and their relationship, they actually tell Milarepa, they said, actually, even at the time of Pemasambhava, which is like 8th century, at that time they said, we already encountered the Dharma. Because when Pemasambhava, when Guru Rinpoche came, we also did this to him. As in, like, they tested him. I said, at that time, we already entered the path. So now they are explaining to Milarepa, it's not like, like we don't know or we don't like what you're doing. But we had to be sure. So we tested you. Now we are sure. So now please guide us. It's basically chapter 29. So have you all started reading any of 29 or no? Okay. So basically in 29, because I want to get to the particular section of the teachings, basically in 29, let me summarize for you, and you should try to read it, because as I said before, which sometimes we lose sight of, I think is important, but then of course I'm doing exactly the thing that I'm critiquing or criticizing, which is I said lamas tend to ignore, the setting of these teachings, and they go straight to, like, the juicy parts, so to say, or the meaty parts, or the tofu parts, or the mushroom part, or tempeh part, whatever you eat, they go right to, like, the yummy part, which is like the dharma part, right? Which is what I'm going to do. So I'm guilty of that. But I think there's so much there, I mean, look at how nature is described. One of the themes there is definitely they're describing something that if you just listen to that description and you say, oh, I want to go there. Okay? And then when you finally get there, you're like, what? Really? Okay. I certainly have felt that before. You hear about this pilgrimage spot and everything. Then you get there, you're like, really? Then it's even more annoying when other people, you go with, and they're like, wow. And you're like, I don't know. I feel kind of cheated, that I have to pretend, otherwise, maybe something is wrong with me, So really, this is showing us, Milarepa's way of experiencing his environment. He could see beyond the appearances. He understood that, the sun is not just the sun. The sun reminds him of, unimpeded wisdom. The moon is not just the moon. The moon reminds him of all-pervading coolness of compassion. The river is not just the river. He perceives the river as, the uninterrupted flow of the pure instructions. So the author, the compiler of these teachings, really show us, that on the one hand you get a sense, when you read carefully, like this is just the wilderness. Now, for us, we might have come from a tradition of like romanticizing the wilderness, the great American tradition of the Romantics. Yeah? But you have to remember, for this context, right, the wilderness is the given and the scary. Yeah, the original audience of this, wilderness is just like, bad things could happen. But it's giving its readers, a different view of wilderness. And maybe you could say romanticizing wilderness. But in this romanticizing, it's not, I would say, not romanticizing, but challenging us to pay attention to, again, our perception. No different from what I just said 5-10 minutes ago. Our karmic baggage predisposes us to interpret and to experience certain conditions that come together and label it pleasure or pain, suffering or happiness. But these conditions so overwhelm us that we forget that the cause still lies within us. So likewise, the way nature, wilderness exists, it's what we habitually see is only one layer of what we see. So go into the wilderness with the botanist, you see something totally different, right? Go into nature, with a geologist, you see something completely different. Go into nature with a forager, you see something completely different. Right? There's so many layers. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So here, do pay attention to that, okay? So here then, the five sisters come to Milarepa and now they give him an offering with a sapphire ladle and this really delicious yogurt. So, and they did some kind of unusual way of approaching him and like paying respects to him, so that then he said, let me examine them. So this time they appeared probably in a more human way. So they didn't look like what they were before when they came to attack and challenge him. But here it says he knows, these are the same entities. But he says, but nonetheless, I'm going to address them and give them a chance to show me further what they know or don't know. So that is the song that he sings, page 326. Starting with Lord Vajradhara, essence of the four kayas. In this time of conflict and degeneration of the teachings, seeking the benefit for a few fortunate ones in this range of mountains covered in snow, the northern land of Bardana, here he emanated in the translator's body. And so here Milarepa is recollecting, remembering the kindness of his guru, of his teacher, Marpa. So he prays to Marpa again and again. So always his song starts with that. So then, now please listen further. Victors and their heirs who reside in the pure realm of the sky, meaning Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. He says, he addresses them in the pure realm of the sky. Once I, a yogi of the great vehicle path, have opened the lotus of those to be tamed, deities with your lattice of light rays that radiate from the sun of your compassion, make the petals of intellect's lotus flourish. In other words, he says, let our minds be ripe, let us be able to comprehend these teachings. You beautiful ones in rank on my left, sisters, I have a question for you. So here, he asked them, who are you? What are you? You tell me, Like, I can tell that you're not human. The way you acted, the way you gave the offerings, and what you gave me, these are not ordinary human things. What is this? The next few pages is basically him interrogating them and saying, who are you? Yeah? Now on page 330, after that whole section, so at the end of those verses is, did you hear of me from elsewhere? How did you come to know of me? Tell me with dignified and honest speech. That is when they replied and they say, you are a genuine being. That means you are real, you are the real thing, right? By the power of the merit accumulated in a previous life, this time you have met an exceptional Siddha Guru, a Guru with attainments. And so he has transmitted everything to you. And now you are this great being. We recognize you. Right? So then after some answer in prose, then they sang a song. Basically repeating what they said in prose. Then they tell him, who they are. They say, we are worldly yaksha women. This is on page 332. I do realize some of you have e-copies, and so you're not having the same page number. But here it's somewhere in the middle of this song. They tell him, they say, we are worldly yaksha women. Yaksha is a class of being that we would call like kind of monster of some sort. So they say, we are, yakshas. Our class is Ajidharata, so some kind of further classification. Shmashana, women who roam in charnel grounds. We are worldly female Dakinis. And we do many things. We have power over many things. So it says, and they tell him how they can move about easily. So they say, they say, even this evening we're going to go to India. Just to show him, their abilities. As for where we reside, then it says, we reside in that mountain over there. This is where, and then they fess up. They say, we have met before, recently, like last summer, the first summer month of last year, we came inflicting harm and creating obstructions. But that is when we finally understood who you are. We had to test you, they said,
Dr. Lye?
Yes.
He's the ones that the biting him on the toe. I was thinking about the one that bit him on the toe.
I don't remember the specific reference, but it's just the last two chapters.
No, yeah, it was. Well, they said they had met him before, and there had been one. And
Yeah, but they're referring to the last two chapters, those encounters. Yeah, yeah. Um, And so then Milarepa says, okay, now that you tell me who you are, okay. Inferring from that, it says, I know then you have done harm not only to like me, but to others. Then they say, can you please give us the bodhicitta vow, which means the formal expression of committing oneself to the Dharma in order to awaken to the Buddha state for the benefit of others. That's in essence what the bodhicitta vow is. A formal declaration that you will dedicate yourself, this life and all the lives to come, that you will dedicate yourself to awaken into the state of Buddha for the benefit of beings. So there's two aspects, right? The wisdom aspect, which is the awakening aspect into the state of Buddha. Then for the benefit of other beings, that's the compassion aspect. So this is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is not just compassion. I think we have become like, kind of like, oh, when we see someone who's very kind, we say, oh, look at the bodhicitta. I mean, not to like be, like so rigid, but sometimes if we just think bodhicitta is just compassion, then we will suffer, because compassion itself involves a lot of different emotions, especially the general way we think of compassion. But bodhicitta has this wisdom aspect, this aspect of the need to see clearly. What are the causes of suffering? What are the causes of happiness? How do we get stuck with suffering? How do we not get happiness? All of that has to see that clearly, right? So they asked for this vow from him, and he said, well, before we even talk about this vow, you give up harming others. He tells them that you give up harming others, He says, if you make this commitment, which is to stop harming even at the risk of your own life, then I can give you the precepts of refuge and bodhicitta. If you don't act in this way, it will be like a court case that leads one to ruin, or like tethered zoos going over the cliff. Zoo is a female. Zoo is a hybrid between a yak and a cow. There's a long footnote there, you will not be a suitable vessel for the profound teachings or to receive this higher instructions if you don't, like on the fundamental level, change the way you behave. So then, of course, he sings another song. So here, in this song, again, he goes over what has happened. So he says, last year, in the last part of spring, you powerful women of samsaric existence, acting as leaders, stirred up and deployed an assembly of worldly devas and ghosts. You hoisted the banners of the 4 battalion ranks. Having prepared to wage your battle, you then rained down savage weapons, but these obstructions did nothing to me. Why? Because I have determined that appearances are mind, and I know that mind itself is empty. And therefore, toward these magical obstructions, these confused appearances, I don't experience any apprehension or fear. Yeah, so he tells them, that is how, you were not able to harm me. Through merely seeing you without control, immense and unbearable compassion arose. And he said, but instead, all your doings, very naturally it stirred up compassion on my side. Because of that, a gentle rain of virtuous dharma fell, and you developed devotion and respect. So here, it reminds me one of the teachings of the Jigten Sumgun, the founder of Drigong Kagyu. We've been in a project, a small project of translating as many of his short teachings as we can translate. And in one teaching, he says, if you want to benefit beings, the best thing that you can do is to work on giving up self-grasping. He says the best thing you can do is that. And then he gave more details. He said, and you want to know how well this activity, this training of giving up self-grasping is? He says, look at how you relate to the 8 worldly concerns. 8 worldly concerns can be divided into 2 columns. Basically, the like column and the don't like column. On the like column is gain, praise, fame, and pleasure. The like column. Gain, praise, fame, and pleasure. The don't like column is loss, blame, defame, and pain. Loss, blame, defame, and pain. He says, you look at that. How tethered are you to these 8 concerns? And as long as the 8 concerns, right, are there, it's going to be very hard to effectively, genuinely benefit others. So conversely, of course, we do things, to help others, to benefit others. Of course, we should try to do that. There are simple things that we can do, right? But as we do those things, if we are paying attention, naturally you will also go, what, am I really benefiting them? This kind of doubts will arise, right? Inevitably. If you're paying attention. If you're not paying attention, then you might kid yourself and think, oh, I'm benefiting others, I'm helping others, when in fact, right, you're just... So at a certain point, you will become so kind of self-conscious, or ability to kind of turn around and look and say, well, am I really, right? So that am I really or am I not, it's going to come. Now, how are you going to be able to know, am I or am I not? You look at how much you are still driven by the 8 worldly concerns, because that will tell us how much self-grasping is still the modus operandi, right? What's really in charge? What is our MO? Our MO is 8 worldly concerns. Then we know, right, that it's still self-grasping at play. Then we cannot really benefit others. So it says the root of compassion is giving up self-grasping. And the measure of that is how much are we dragged around by these 8 worldly, these 8 mundane concerns. Yes.
Well, I think these things are, really, really deep.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know yourself,
Yes.
and you don't need to fool yourself. And the main word is motive.
Uh-huh.
From generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is my motive? And, am I at that place where I can even see what my motive is?
Exactly.
Am I aware? Am I conscious?
Yes. Yes.
what's going on.
Yes. And that is really hard, to kind of
Yeah.
the more the more you progress at a certain point, the more you're suspicious of your own motive.
What do you mean? Is that good? Because couldn't you?
No, it's not good or bad, it's just the process, right?
Oh,
Because at first you are kind of naive. You say, "Oh, my motive is good," right?
oh yeah, yeah,
But then after a while you're like,
yeah, yeah,
right? You kind of second guess, right? Which is natural. I
yeah.
think if we actually pay attention, we will start having these doubts.
Well, that's growing. I mean, that is a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And ultimately here, right, this teaching that I was just mentioned is like, then, Jigden Sungwon says, so if you keep going like this, then you might be overwhelmed by all this doubt about am I or am I not, right? So then he says, then what you need to do is check and see how you are still under the control of the mundane concerns. He says that will tell you where you are. Yeah. And so then the less you are under the control of these concerns, then the more you know, okay, it's altruistic. Yeah. Yeah. Because as you say, it's really hard to know my motivation. At first I thought it was like, oh, bodhicitta. And then you're like, I don't know about that now.
We learn that manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Oh
know.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, it's just stuck. It's stuck. It's rooted. It's in the roots,
Yes.
man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about our own rakshasas and yakshas and
Mm-hmm.
in our world, my
Mm-hmm.
world,
Mm-hmm.
and when things come up, it sounds like it might be an effective way to kind of look at that, like what is what my reaction, my discomfort or
Yes.
situation, looking at it from the point of, well, which eight worldly concern am I kind of working with on this? I mean,
Yes.
is there any kind of like practical reason why that would be the just analyzing obstacles that way be useful?
Wait, say that again. Like the very last part, where
Yeah,
you took a turn
well,
there.
I, I used to have this Buddhist therapist who was very annoying. Would say, "What are you getting out of this situation, this problem you have?
Mm-hmm.
Way that you're reacting. What are you getting out of it, reacting this way?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we were on this topic of like, well, what are our demons and so forth
Mm-hmm.
as they arise for us in our own lives,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of Buddhist approach, I sort of the standard is, oh, you let go and you just sort of like settle in and so forth, rather than analyzing it as like, oh, this is a worldly concern issue as well,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
my own. So is this a kind of
Yeah, on the contemplation level, right?
yeah,
Listening, contemplating, and meditating.
yeah,
So I think the contemplating level is not identical to some therapy work.
yeah,
So you're working through like what is this. And then so seeing, like this much of mundane concerns are going on here. Even if I thought I started with altruism, but in fact these things crept in. And so I think if we're able to see this pattern, then that is some kind of insight has arisen,
yeah,
in this situation. In fact, I even because I'm so good at my Buddhist stuff, I just use them as weapons, right?
Yeah.
Rather than assassinating yourself, you use it to assassinate someone else. And that's not allowed.
Yeah, this is an interesting.
Unless they hired you. They have to give you $1 before
Big
that
bucks.
because before you there is the client and what protection attorney-client privilege
Right.
yeah, so that's when you tell someone, please be my guru, and then they take your $1.
I think it's like a lot of things. Buddhism, we're not all alike.
Uh-huh.
So what's going to work for one may not work for somebody else. We have the 5 Buddha families. We've got, all kinds of things that, could work for, you know, and, I just think it's interesting because some days, I just want to be. I don't want to read another book, look things
Mm-hmm.
up. I mean, especially like reading another book.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to have my day. I just want to, do whatever, live it
Mm-hmm.
instead of, read it over and over. And, every day's different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I definitely, because of the 12 steps, do a lot of insight searching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Melissa?
Oh, yeah. So I'm just wondering, is that in this song, is Milarepa questioning the Serengme sisters on their motivation? Is that why?
Is Milarepa doing what? Sorry?
Is he questioning them on their motivation? I'm wondering how this discussion relates back to the song.
Oh, not necessarily.
Okay.
This discussion came up from my saying that Kyoba Jigten Sumgun, in one of his teachings about this question of how do I really benefit other beings? He said it begins with, and it's all based on, you always understand that the way to really benefit beings is to work on giving up self-grasping. And if you want to know, if you want to measure, if you want some kind of measure, if you want some kind of signs, if you want some kind of indication, are you progressing well in giving up self-grasping? Look at how you relate to the 8 worldly concerns. Are you become more free? Have you become more free from them? Or are you habitually getting trapped by them? That is a good way of kind of gauging, where am I? If we get less and less caught up in the winds, right? Think of like a plane flying, you fly into the wrong mix, it's pretty bumpy. Where all the winds come together, If you're a skilled pilot, I think, you fly with the winds, you let the winds take you, Yeah. Then the discussion about motivation is said, because we are necessarily, if we take this work seriously, we will start to question ourselves. Am I or am I not? Am I or am I not? Right? And it's easy to get caught up in am I, am I not, and get paralyzed. But here, as a suggestion on how not to get paralyzed in am I or am I not, then go back to that question. How much self-grasping is involved here? There's another step in this particular teaching that I'm quoting. He says, one step that he says, very practical, this one. He says, how well are you getting along with people? That's hard, getting along with people. Of course, he's not saying get along with people, right? Karen, go to the bars and hang out with people and, get along. People want you to drink. You're like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure, I'll drink. He's not talking about that, obviously, right? That kind of getting along will lead to just ruin, right? Getting along with afflictive emotions. He's not talking about that. But nonetheless, for me at least, I find this teaching very helpful. Given all the things that he's not talking about, then he asks, like, how well are you getting along with others? We like to think that I don't get along with others because I have principles, they don't have principles. But he's pointing out, most of the time you don't get along with people because of your self-grasping. My schedule, my agenda, my time, my politics, my whatever, He says, that's why you don't get along. And then he says, if you don't get along with others, how the heck are you going to help others? He says, forget about talking about helping others if you cannot get along with others. And then he says, you know why you don't get along with others? Because of self-grasping. So he says, again, you have to get rid of self-grasping. That's the most compassionate thing you can do, he says, is to, keep working and getting rid of self-grasping. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you stand in your own truth? So what's the difference between standing in your own truth and not being ruled by your principles?
You have to test it, no amount of talking about it.
So I guess standing in your own truth.
Sometimes you fail, sometimes you pass, then you learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of suffering a little bit to learn some important lessons. Yeah. That you are asking the question is really the right place. Yeah? Then see what happens, Yes.
Well, I've got two really close teachers that I've had for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And one says, tolerate others and do Tonglen and do whatever you can.
Yes.
And then I have another one that says, try to stay away from anything toxic like that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I don't know what to do.
Both are necessary. Both are necessary, It's Dharma is not just one, this, that, These are a bag of tools that you've been given,
It's hard though to decide.
Well, waking up in the morning is hard too. Really.
Getting out of bed is hard.
Oh, yeah, getting out of bed is hard. And then staying in bed also becomes hard, right? This is samsara.
Yeah.
Like just this morning, I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. And then after all, you're like, God, I don't like this feeling of staying in bed. But I don't want to get out of bed. Like... Then eventually you just get up and you say, oh, actually, it wasn't such a big deal to just get up. Right? And you're like, look, 2 hours just went away like that, But at least when you're able to see that, right? Then those 2 hours are not wasted. Take to heart. Look at that. What was that all about, I don't want to get out of bed. And then after a while, you're like, I think my bones are starting to ache. Lying in bed like this. What is wrong with this mattress? Oh, let me go on Amazon and see if I can find a better mattress, right? When in fact, it's not the mattress, it's the energy that we spend. Or the energy that we're just draining and wasting away, And you're like, okay.
I just bought a new mattress.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I
ready
remember
for
there was
it.
some discussion about mattresses, like maybe on Facebook. I saw some.
Oh yeah.
There was some back and forth about choosing mattresses. So
Right.
now, where I want to, I have to leave soon. Where I want to call your attention to is on the physical book, page 336, is that song towards the end, right? He says, until now you were savage and erratic. You have habituated in evil and deceitful conducts. Thus, henceforth, you must brought to resolve the following. Take on the conduct of commitments and vows. What does this mean? There is no other meaning of the Buddha's teachings than this. If you don't think properly about cause and effect, about the karma of virtue and non-virtue, you'll have the unbearable suffering of the lower realms. So I ask you, please be heedful and mindful of the results that come from the subtlest karma. So he says, you begin with that. If you do not look upon desires, so next, so the ground level is, be clear about where suffering and happiness comes from. It comes from choices that we make. That's what karma is. Karma is about making choices. Now, of course, anyone who has lived long enough, right, to be sitting here and talking about this will also know it's not always easy. Yeah, duh. But nonetheless, the basic fact of karma we need to be clear about. Then he says, then if you do not look upon desires as faulty and do not turn from entanglements deep within, attachment, entanglements, you'll never be free from the prison of samsara. Do I look at desires as faulty? Well, depending on the day. Whenever I think desires are not faulty, I guarantee suffering comes not too far behind. But again, we also know it's not so easy. Because we're still not convinced. Yes, of course, that's normal. But try to learn from each occasion where desire hooked you in and you struggle with that that hook. Recognize that. With the understanding that all is illusion. This all is illusion is not like, all is illusion, I give up on life, I'm going back to bed. No, it's saying, get up from bed. And go through everything to see how they are just temporary conditions. Don't get stuck. Rely on this antidote for the cause of suffering. Cause of suffering is grasping. If you do not show gratitude towards the kindness of the six realms beings who have been your kind parents, you will deviate toward the lower approach, the lower jhana. Since that is so, with great love, please train in bodhicitta mind. So this is very succinct, right? Understand cause and effect again and again and again. See the fault of thirst, desire, and how you get entangled in that. Then train in seeing the kindness of all beings and work towards their happiness. These are the three precepts, so to say, at the heart of what we practice. It's these three. And these three are not three things, in fact. When you begin to have more and more experience of how these 3 points work, you see that they are all one single point. Yeah, they mutually reinforce each other. This is, the gist of, to me, this chapter, Milarepa, the gist of what he has to tell them is right there. Then, everything else is an further elaboration on these points. Yeah, of course, there are more subtle points, finer points. But if we get too distracted or excited about those subtle points, and instead of applying this information. Applying means, like, now make this information your prescription glasses and wear it. Then we will see more clearly what we need to see. Then the rakshas, yakshas that turn up, they can all become your disciples. Okay. I don't know if you're leaving so early, but I have to go. So, yeah, so next week, I think I should probably be able to meet. So, yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Well, I'm
All right.
going to step out and you all can discuss for another 10, 15 minutes. I think you have another.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Boy, that was good.
Sure was.
Man.
It's pretty heavy what he told you, Laura. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You have to make some decisions.
And just get out of your own,
Comfort zone.
yeah. And don't be easily offended and give people half a chance.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about relationships.
I guess I'm a little confused about these Saringma sisters, but it's probably because I need to just keep reading.
What do you mean you're confused? What are you confused about?
Like they are sort of like spirit beings, and they're associated with these five mountains, and they show up to test Milarepa to make sure he like walks his walk and talks his talk, right? And they've already done this before previously with someone else.
Sambhava.
With Padma Sambhava, right? Like generations ago. And but yet they still create suffering for beings, and Milarepa has to tell them how to
Well,
stop.
they aren't creating the suffering. It's your perception of them that's creating the suffering, is what I got out of it.
Yeah, but they're still doing harm to people. And that's what he would said that they needed to give up if they wanted to get bodhicitta.
Right.
Oh, so that's where you're confused, is they keep doing this, but they're not actually taking his advice. Is that where you're getting confused?
Well, it seems like they're very realized, they've met Milarepa before, they've tested Padma Sambhava, that's why I say maybe I just need to keep reading and learn more about them.
It might be a good question for Dr. Lye about, they were apparently tamed by Padmasambhava, so what in the world are they doing?
Yeah, right.
Padmasambhava was like really, so masterful. So what's up? Is this all just a ruse kind of thing?
Well, there's some kind of loop going on in that they can't cause any problems for Milarepa, right? I mean, whatever
Right.
they do, Milarepa says, fantastic, this is a good day, sure, And I think that Padmasambhava was like that too. So could these people actually kind of, or these yakshas, um, create obstacles for realized people? Uh,
Ultimately,
I mean,
no.
there's a level of like literalism too. It's just like, yeah, well, snowstorms and rock slides and ailments and stuff like that have to be lived through, and they're not there. And whether they're agents, causal agents that way, but I hear what you're saying, and I don't know. That's where I kind of drift into like this is a teaching situation. Uh, it's a song of realization and not necessarily history, you know. So
Maybe they've just taken
it's a
on.
question we should ask him next week about that, about because I wondered that too. It's like, hey, Padmasambhava just what they forget, you know.
Maybe they,
I mean, it was centuries. I mean, you're allowed to forget after 500 years or something, Yeah. Okay.
Well, what I was thinking of is that, I mean, that's what they really are. I mean, they're really, um, what I'm not going to say evil, but whatever they are, that's what they are. But this time, I mean, I guess they're evolving, because this time they asked for the bodhicitta vows, and that's like, whoa.
yeah.
So maybe, it's just, it's a story that takes some time, and maybe they're getting it. And then, just having the experience from Padmas and Baba may have given them, that that they needed. I mean, and anyway, that's what I was thinking.
That's pretty much where I am, Karen, too. It's just we kind of have to think of it as how they started as these like wild mountain spirits. And that's not just something happens and then they're different, it's the process.
Right.
I also wonder is like, are we on some level supposed to identify with the mountain demons, in the sense of, yeah, we've heard this before, but now we really want to have the bodhicitta so that we can really, and it's like, really? Well, stop harming people. I mean, he's addressing us to our problems and the problems we create for others, and and we want somebody to fix us. And he says, well, yeah, all you need to do is stop harm. I'll start with stop harming other, stop harming others. I mean, in a way, talking to these demonesses, he's talking to us. Uh,
So that clarifies something for me. It connects this song to the teaching that Dr. Lai gave us from Jigten Sumgon, because that was basically, how to tell um, if your motivations are really altruistic, or attached to the eight worldly concerns, right? And another way to tell is to see how you get along with people. So it comes down to that basic level of relation with people,
Hmm.
with others.
yeah.
That was my biggest confusion about today, was like, okay, that's yes, that teaching is wonderful, but how does it relate to what we're reading? Right. So thank you.
Another thing that happens is later. Well, I don't know if it's later on. I don't really think it's later on, but it's in some of my teachings from Kentrell, and that is dakinis become big time protectors. I don't know where that fits in, but I do know that when they're having a ceremony or something, or a soak or whatever, then um, the dakinis are the protector. Now, I'm just thinking again, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to go into what I think today, right this second.
You just want to be.
Because I want to be at my 12 o'clock, my 1 o'clock meeting. Laura, was that silly that I said I want to be? You know what I mean?
No, I can relate to that because that's exactly
And
where
it's
I
like,
felt.
how many more books, aren't I? I've got to have some experience.
Yes, I'm there. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
like I'm having to force myself to read something inspirational because I'm just tired of reading.
Me too.
I'm so there right now. I just want to use the information that I'm learning and practice it,
Right. Right.
Like my granddaughter's birthday is coming up this Friday, and my daughter has to invite me and my ex-husband. So I've got to be there and I've got to show up. I mean, I've just got to use this information, and be the best that I can be around him, you know?
Woo.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be using it.
Well, good luck with that.
I think it'll be fine. I hope. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fine. There won't be a fist fight.
No, but I don't want their, it's just so interesting. I just want to be comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
And I want him, and if I can be comfortable in my own skin, then that will allow him to be comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my goal. That's my aim. And get out of my self.
But you're not responsible.
Yeah, or just get out of my self-grasping. Hey, she's Ada's grandfather. She's my daughter's father. Yeah. He deserves respect and honor. Yeah. Show up and do it.
As I'm
That's what I got out of the teaching.
It was good. Yeah, that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
The more I sit here, the more I see there's this side and that side. This side and that side. I mean, everything. It's just that dualism. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
The thing I was thinking about is, a lot of people say, well, people that have been, in Buddhism forever, all they think they have to do is just sit and not do anything. And I mean, and then we just said the opposite. So,
don't learn anything, yeah.
Yeah. That's why I like to come here and hear other people's opinion.
Yeah. And I think I understood what he meant by when I said, what's the difference between standing in your principle and standing in your own truth?
Mm-hmm. Because
I think the difference is when you stand in your own principle, you are challenging other people. You're saying, or it's more of a challenge, where if you stand in your own truth, you see that they have a right to be who they are and to think how they think, but they basically have the same wants and desires as you. They just think differently than you. And to stand in your own truth is to know that, and to not be defensive or challenged or offended.
Mm-hmm. Or take it personally.
Like that mantra he gave us last time about, is it so? Is that really so? Like your truth, your judgments and all that kind of stuff. Just have a little skepticism about it, little distance.
Yeah.
From it is really empowering in a way.
Yeah.
Because you can't do anything about anybody else, but.
Or what can I learn from this?
That's right.
Yeah. What can I take away from this that's going to make me better?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's how you open up. That's the
Yeah.
door. That's the door for, spreading it
growing. Yeah. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Laura, what I saw that he was saying is that, our concepts are, do we have our concepts that this is the right way and that's the right way? So I think he was talking about a little bit of that.
Yeah. It was a good class. I
Yes.
love it when he comes.
Okay. And he's coming next time too.
Oh, good. Yay.
Oh, that's great.
Who's coming to the 12 step at 1? Me, everybody. Yay, I'm glad.
Hey, Casey.
Bye,
Bye.
y'all.
See
Bye.
y'all next week.
Anyone want to dedicate?
Okay.
We could dedicate, sure, but
Yeah.
we don't have to.
We can.
Everybody's
Everybody's
leaving.
bailing out. We can still dedicate.
I'll stay on and dedicate for
Yeah,
whoever's.
let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, we can dedicate for everyone.
Right. We can do it
And look,
for
we
the
only
whole
need
world.
to divide the merit into 4 parties.
No.
We get more that way,
No.
right? Right?
No.
That's not how
No.
it works,
No.
so.
Merit's
All
for
right, all
everybody.
right.
Everybody gets the merit.
Okay, let's see. I just because it's handy, I'm gonna share my screen.
Oh, I'm gonna turn off our audio though.
Okay, just the short one will do here. By this virtue may I achieve the omniscient state. May all who wander in the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies' confusion. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks,
See ya.
Melissa.
See ya,
Thank
Zach.
you.
I'm
Bye.
Bye.